Magic Emperor Chapter 889. Zhuo Fan feigned a panic, questioning if they really intended to pull off a daylight robbery in Flying Cloud City, a place renowned for its tight security. The middle-aged man stood there stunned, completely speechless at such a bizarre train of thought. Being branded a common thief felt even more insulting than being seen as someone out for blood. He urged the young man to calm down and listen to his explanation, insisting they weren't the type to resort to violence. Zhuo Fan shot back that he was just a low-level cultivator with absolutely nothing worth their time in a massive place like Flying Cloud City. He added that a guy like him wasn't even worth a second glance from people like him. He explained he was just a single dad looking after a kid, and didn't own a single valuable asset or treasure. He insisted that buying this house didn't make him loaded. In fact, he was pretty much broke now. Just as the man tried to get a word in, Zhuo Fan cut him off by doubling down on his whining. The man looked at his own high-end clothes and his formidable crew, then let out a long, helpless sigh. He turned to his men and asked if they seriously looked like a bunch of thugs to them. The guys around him just traded looks and shook their heads, clearly fed up with Zhuo Fan's cluelessness. They figured their leader shouldn't waste his breath on the nonsense coming from such a low-level nobody. One of them told the boss not to pay any mind to the guy's rambling. He praised the leader's noble vibe, insisting there was no way he could be mistaken for some low-life thug. They were convinced Zhuo Fan was just so freaked out that he'd started talking total gibberish. Everyone else chimed in, agreeing that had to be the case. The crowd started whispering, shooting Zhuo Fan mocking and condescending looks. A few even looked at him with pure disdain and decided he wasn't even worth their attention anymore. The leader raised a hand to quiet everyone down and told them they shouldn't be so harsh. He explained that it was totally fair for Zhuo Fan to mistake them for villains after they'd basically barged into his home. Still, he maintained that they were honorable people who would never dream of hurting innocents, no matter how desperate things got. He stressed that if they acted like that, they'd be no better than their enemy, Shangguan. That would be a massive stain on their family's reputation. At that, all his men stood up in unison, showing their deep respect for their leader's wise perspective. The middle-aged man gave a friendly smile and explained to Zhuo Fan that they were actually in a real tight spot. He was hoping Zhuo Fan could let them lay low for a few days and asked for his generous help. He promised to never forget the favor, and expressed how much they'd appreciate it. Then, the man stood up and gave Zhuo Fan a polite bow from across the room. Zhuo Fan figured that whether the guy was just putting on an act or was a legit gentleman, seeing someone in such a high position act this humble was pretty rare. Even so, Zhuo Fan kept up the act, sounding bitter, as he said that since they'd threatened his and his kids' lives, he didn't exactly have a choice but to go along with it. The middle-aged man couldn't help but chuckle, and the rest of the crew burst out laughing at his attitude. He reassured Zhuo Fan that they were just crashing there for a bit, and wouldn't lay a finger on him or the kid. Zhuo Fan still played the skeptic, pointing out how insanely powerful they were compared to him, while asking where they even came from. Right away, one of the subordinates snapped at Zhuo Fan for having the nerve to pry into their business. Zhuo Fan faked a scare, clutching the kid tight and backing away. After checking his subordinate, the middle-aged man smiled and let it slip that they were from the eastern lands. Zhuo Fan thought it over in sight, remarking that the East must be a total mess if experts like them were forced to run away. The middle-aged man felt totally defeated by Zhuo Fan's logic and asked if he still seriously thought they were just bandits. Zhuo Fan was quick to deny it. He put on a terrified face and insisted he wouldn't dream of calling them robbers. He said they were just borrowing his house and everything in it for the time being. He added that he wasn't exactly holding his breath for them to return any of it later, either. The man's face fell, and he just hung his head with a helpless sigh. It really stunned his pride to be seen as a villain by some random young guy. Right then, a giggle rang out as a girl stepped out from the back to tease her dad. She told him he didn't need to be so polite to a guy who talked as much trash as Zhuo Fan. Both Zhuo Fan and the kid were caught off guard by how stunning the girl was. With her was a young guy with sharp features and a cold, piercing gaze. Despite his age, this guy clearly had some seriously high-level cultivation under his belt. The young man walked over and gave the middle-aged man a respectful greeting. The man introduced the girl to Zhuo Fan, saying she was his daughter. Zhuo Fan gave a nod, but inside, he was still pretty on edge about the whole situation. The man let out a big laugh and said that if his daughter was going to be Zhuo Fan's cousin, then that made him Zhuo Fan's uncle. He figured it was only natural for an uncle to crash at his nephew's place. Zhuo Fan had to hand it to the guy for being smooth enough to find a way to legitimize taking over his house. Zhuo Fan let out a sigh and reluctantly called the man uncle, just like he wanted. The man insisted that Zhuo Fan address him properly by that title from now on. Instead of arguing, Zhuo Fan started recounting how he'd saved the girl's life and all the risks he'd taken by hiding her. The man said he was grateful, but he made it clear they had to stay there for their own safety, and their main objective. He explained that with the security being so tight right now, this house was actually the perfect hideout. He told him that whether he liked it or not, they were going to use their family cover to deal with the guards. Zhuo Fan acted terrified, asking if they were planning to kill him just to keep him quiet. The men reassured him they were just putting them under house arrest for a while and hoped he'd cooperate to avoid any unnecessary trouble. He promised to let them go once their mission was wrapped up. He reminded him that playing along would be better for everyone, especially since they were family now. Zhuo Fan looked hesitant and asked how he was supposed to trust that they'd actually keep their word and not hurt him. The man swore on the honor of the Shangguan clan to guarantee his safety. Zhuo Fan acted shocked to hear the name of the most powerful clan in the eastern lands. The man confirmed he was Shangguan Fiction and introduced the inner circle traveling with him. Zhuo Fan then asked about his connection to the Lord of Flying Cloud City, Shangguan Fiction. Shangguan Fiction snapped, stating that was his traitorous younger brother whom he no longer acknowledged. He explained their mission was to reclaim a stolen treasure and hoped Zhuo Fan would help them out by providing a place to hide.